when the deal was kind of final and you saw the number of zeros, how did that make you feel?
I think it was. So I called Google. I said, I want to be your partner. I had no idea what plans they had. Then tapped us on the shoulder and told us, we're launching this thing called. I was like, oh my God, this is what I was trying to do.
What would you describe as that key difference between those who were and weren't successful, since I'm highly summarizing it there?
I figured out very quickly how...
Tony Safoian is the former CEO and president of SADA, one of the world's top business and technology consultancy and cloud services partners, acquired by Insights for almost $500 million.
Within a large company like that, you actually have subcultures in some way. Like, and even Netflix ultimately had two cultures, the studio and the technology.
And, Elon Musk wrote, anybody can talk to anybody else about anything at any time. If anybody tries to stop direct communication, you're fired. Like, that's me. If you're really trying to scale something and grow something big and you're not building you have to pay people more money than you'll make that year.
Welcome, Tony.
Welcome.
I'm going to give you the blueprint. And if you follow exactly what I say, you can do it too. No, I'm just kidding.
Perfect. That is what people want to hear. Yeah.
I guess a good segue. I mean,
I'm practicing for a future life as some sort of, I'm going to sell books and CDs and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, Tony, I've, read and follow you on LinkedIn with the content. So I'm familiar that SADA started as more of a family business led by your dad. And then you joined after kind of your .com bubble stint, and then eventually became CEO. So what were those early days like?
Yeah, it was actually, my mom was a part of it too. Before SADA, she had her own little, graphic design business. A couple of people worked for her literally out of the house. So she's sort of, I guess, the first entrepreneur in the family, as you could put it. And it's actually kind of a fortuitous timing of when we're recording this, because also her last day at SADA was last Friday. So she just finally retired.
Wow.
I was at a retirement speech, and I think at Thanksgiving too. I made a statement which remains, I think, true to this day, and was always true, is that you can tell by the chronology of when me, my dad, and my mom left, as far as who the most important Safoian always was. They kept her the longest. So separately, even though my dad was sort of helping my mom a little bit on the sales side, kind of finding clients, in the mid 90s, but my dad had this idea to launch a software company to develop custom applications. That's his background. He is a classically trained, kind of Soviet era engineer. Software engineering was sort of very, very new. When he was studying it, computer science was like the closet of the math department, right? The average university, but that's his background: COBOL, Borland, mainframes. Even in this compulsory service in the military back then, he was a comms person, doing communications and Morse code and stuff like that. So he worked in tech here in this country. So he understood the value of software as it was evolving. And he understood that there was actually a business of serving customers, businesses in their needs around software, and of course, which would later evolve to kind of networking, hardware, infrastructure, things like that. So yeah, this .com, well researched, by the way, that I was working at was imploding back in 2000. And I had a choice to make. I could have stayed in Orange County, found another job. I had some great offers, I remember. But culturally, and also just being the only child, I was like, let me move back up to LA, back to my room, my childhood room, and see if I can help my parents, with whatever, right? So moved up. The SADA business was launched August 16th, 2000. I joined January 2001. And at the time, there were still other partners involved. My mom's business and my dad's business were separate. In 2003, what happened was the other partners left, and we basically merged my mom's and my dad's businesses under my leadership as CEO. So those were sort of the very early days of SADA. And it was just, I don't know, man, we didn't have a master plan. The thought of raising capital never crossed our minds because we didn't even know what that was, or as a construct. We didn't grow up or live around people who did that. We didn't come from an entrepreneur background. We didn't have friends who did that. We had friends who had other kind of mom and pop businesses who just sort of built a business as far as they could fund it through revenue of the business, like the old fashioned way. So that's what we did. And I didn't have classical training in computer science. My dad kind of discouraged me from following that for whatever reason. He wanted me to be a doctor because that's what all Armenian immigrant men and women are supposed to become. But when I decided I didn't want to do that, I pivoted. My kind of last year of university, took a bunch of jobs, etc. But what I did have the skills to do just by osmosis and influence was like, I understand how technology worked. We always had technology in the house. We didn't have furniture sometimes, but we always had like the latest PC that I tinkered with and played on all like throughout my childhood. So I understood technology, understood how networks work, infrastructure systems. I could fix them. I could network them together. And so when I joined SADA, I didn't know how to write software, but I did know how to fix the computers of the people we're writing software for. So that's what I started to do. And I did everything. I crawled under the desks, plugged things in, and figured out different business models that made sense, and helped where I could. I mean, it was very, very, very humble, very mom and pop beginnings.
So it sounds like the blueprint there is Nike. Just do it, because it sounds like you just kind of
whatever I can do.
Yeah.
And when did kind of the idea that and the foresight to say, oh, cloud is the future, and when did that come into play with Microsoft and Google?
I think it was experiential. Again, for whatever reason. Again, maybe it's partly genetic because of my dad, or experiential, growing up in this family that was highly, surrounded by latest technology. I guess that's what we prefer, prioritize spending money on, because we didn't have a lot of it. But I as I was going around fixing people's computers, I was like, God, this is like, all this data is distributed, all this stuff is distributed. The first thing I figured out was that the break fix model of IT services was really dumb. Like, I just sat at my desk and waited for something to break, and then I would get a call, and we'd go in this emergency mode because their business is down because they can't function, and try to fix it under high pressure and send a big bill. Like, that's a terrible experience for everybody. So I was like, look, let me create a model that now, of course, managed services is like the standard. Is I'm just going to bill you per month, and I'm going to keep your systems from going down. Because the reason it's going down is like, you're not doing backups, you don't have antivirus, you're defragging your hard drive, whatever. Like, if somebody just looked at that once a month or once every 2 weeks, like, it wouldn't go down. So that actually was the first thing that scaled. And by scaled, I mean, we got like 20 customers pretty quickly. And then, so that forced us to I hired a couple of people. I have all this stuff in the car, and I used to drive around from this place. I was like, all this stuff is everywhere, and I have to go there to fix it. What if it was all co-located in one place? Then I wouldn't have to do that. And this is early days of Citrix came out with their kind of terminal virtualization stuff, basically application virtualization, right? And terminal server was there. So I was like, wait a minute, I could put Exchange in one place. I could put file stores in one place, and I could just give people a dumb terminal experience. Nothing can break, right? I just have to maintain the core. I convinced 2 of our managed services clients to try it. We created this snazzy name and try to figure out how to price it. And they tried it, and I figured out very quickly how building and maintaining data centers was so cost prohibitive for someone like me. It was so difficult technically to get right. So we actually rolled those customers back. So it was totally through a random incident by which I found some ad one day for Google search appliance. It was like this hardware that allowed you to search your behind the firewall data with the same Google experience that the internet was beginning to fall in love with in 2005 and 2006. So I called Google. I said, I want to be a partner. I had no idea what plans they had, but I was like, Google is cool and they have something for businesses, and I want to be in that market. So it was, but when they then tapped us on the shoulder and told us we're launching this thing called Gmail for your domain. They already had Gmail. Like, you could put your own business domain on Gmail. I was like, oh my God, this is what I was trying to do. But it's freaking hard. You mean like I can do this for customers and they're going to build the data centers? Like, whoa, that's amazing, right? So it became clear to me that was the future because of my own experience of the alternative being like so bad, so difficult.
That's
so inefficient.
Yeah. It's so interesting when you mention it that way, because I never thought about the dawn of time for any of that stuff. It just happened, on this and here. And obviously I'm set up leveraging Google through my domains now. And I remember even at the time seeing when we were at Disney and seeing that Disney animation that they had set up in this sort of way. And then eventually when I was over at Netflix, they had set up this way. And it's like, as things have evolved, that's just almost, I don't want to call it the norm, but it is much more of the norm today. Yeah. Obviously others might leverage, Microsoft, there's other solutions around it.
Yeah,
but that's so interesting to think about. Yeah. Somebody having to help set that up out of the gate. I just would have never thought about that.
Yeah. Email was sort of the first domino. Email was the most obvious. Email was first. Email went fast, and now nobody hosts their own email. Obviously, infrastructure, AWS came very quickly. That became the standard. They went first. Yeah. They had a 10-year head start or whatever on Microsoft and Google, but infrastructure sort of came second in my mind. But email, first mainstream application to go all cloud, and we were at the precipice of it because this was 2 years before Microsoft had any answer to a similar offering.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. You sometimes forget how fast technology moves because it falls on your lap. You're like, oh, this is cool. I remember at Disney in the early days, one of the projects was how to get off of fax machines because everybody was faxing purchase orders.
Oh, yeah.
And now when I think about it, I'm like, holy crap, what a painful experience.
Man, we implemented so much of like digital software faxing stuff for our customers. Yeah. Like it would take it would scan it would put it in a folder, and like it was like there was some good sized software companies that digitized fax. I remember. Yeah.
In that kind of vein, Tony, how did your role as a CEO evolve as technology and evolved and as you guys scaled?
I think there's multiple vectors that have to evolve, and sometimes at different times at different paces. But first and foremost, as a leader and CEO of a company, I don't care of any size, I think you see the best CEOs are like this. Like they have to understand and continue to understand their industry intimately. They have to understand what's going on in their own companies, like what they're good at, what they're not good at, so they can continue to guide and drive the evolution of their own company to meet customers, not only where they are, but what they're going to be. So the intimacy with entertainment, like what are the tastes and the ways of consumption and distribution of entertainment for the future? Like if you're creating entertainment and don't understand that, right, it's going to be very hard for you to stay relevant and to be a leader in that, for example. So for me, like that vector had to continue to evolve. So I still do, but nowhere near the same pace. But I used to just devour everything all the time. I knew everything happening, every major company, what they were doing, like enterprise software trends, enterprise buyer trends, the evolution of technology itself. And for whatever reason, I had a pretty good instinct around being able to tell kind of where the puck is going. Cloud was not a tough call for me, but I was in the right place at the right time. But we got cloud, I think, years before anyone else did, really. And that was one of the only reasons we were successful, because the other much bigger, better funded, with much more experienced leadership, like they just basically gave us a window for many years to kind of like take over the space. So thank you for that, all the big companies. So that's one area. I think the other main area is, of course, leadership itself, what it means to lead well, to hire well, to manage well, to enable yourself to scale, functionally scale. Because yes, I used to crawl around desks and plug in, computers and wire tie things together and test things and drive around. But like, you can't scale a business if the leader can test to continue to do that. So that's just like, and then it just goes there's layers to that, right? If you don't hire exceptional people that you can trust to do things better than you can do yourself at multiple levels, then you can't really scale the business. You can't work on the business if you're like serving customers yourself all the time. And the other one, which I think was more almost like a psychological evolution, I think, especially coming with no experience. I remember early days, it was so emotional for me to not win a deal, to lose a customer, for one of my employees to leave or whatever, right? Like these things, everything bothered me so much because I'm just, I think I'm just a big-hearted person in general, but I took everything to heart. And I think that was it was through necessity, like existential. Like if I couldn't evolve myself for those things not to really bother me, like you can't actually build a business because you'll just crawl up into a ball and cry every day. That's what will happen. Yeah. So that's the other, I think, major vector of evolution. And there's other things. I think it's important to be an exceptional communicator when you're a leader. I had a philosophy and biology double major for a long time until I dropped by, but I still finished in philosophy, which means I read and wrote a lot. I had to as part of my degree, but then you have to translate into how do you do public speaking? How do you give a good presentation? How do you tell a good story? And I think all leaders have to be exceptional storytellers. So that's something that had to evolve over time. One of the reasons we too launched a podcast back in 2019. So I thought telling stories is very, very important. And there's tons more. I wrote a little thing 3.5 years ago about the 6 or 8 big things that I learned over time. But I think my own evolution had those kind of 3 main vectors.
And I'm curious on a couple of those. As you went through that evolution, for you, was a lot of it just, lack of a better way to put it, learning on the job, refining it, or were there like specific books, people, coaching, course, anything that you leaned into?
Yeah, there was actually a very healthy combination, I think, of learning through experience, which I think is often the best teacher, but then the self-realization. My wife still jokes about this. We're dating at the time. I was like, babe, I got to go to business school. Like it was 2008. Our customers were getting bigger because we were like mainstream in this Google offering. We're serving huge universities and a lot of early public sector adopters, telcos. I was like, I have big customers now and they all have MBAs and they're speaking a language like I don't understand. Like I got to go. I'm a philosophy major. Like it's ridiculous. Somebody's going to Google this one day and be like, what business does this guy have running this business, like running this company? I'm not buying from him. So I went to, I found the fastest and easiest MBA program I could find, which is the executive program. I picked USC over UCLA because I went to UCLA for some other stuff early days. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. 2 years, I'm in and out. Every other Friday, Saturday, I could do this. I don't have kids yet. I got married midway between the programs. I wasn't even married yet. And she's like, I'm so silly. I thought that was a stupid idea, but no, you were totally right. So that was important. I remember, of course, meanwhile, like I kept, reading, just devouring everything I could. A lot of Malcolm Gladwell, a lot of Simon Sinek, a lot of, all these guys, some of the books sitting on the shelf. But, and then the other big leap for me, again, this is more about a psychological leap, around the art of the possible. At some point, a couple of years after the MBA, I was like, look, there was 3 entrepreneurs in this group of 75. They're all like Disney executives and IBM executives. Like, I can't learn that. Like, they're on a different journey, right? Like, how do I surround myself with other people building shit? And I was like, YPO. I'm going to join YPO. My business was barely big enough to qualify. I went in for many, many years. It was very easy in that environment to get inspired by people's stories of how, like, I remember people in my group, like, raising money, private equity, selling to a company, building businesses, all their struggles. I was like, okay, that became my next MBA. It was like, just, this is a conducive environment to sharing and very intimate, confidential environments, how these things are happening. So I was like, I got to be in the tent, almost like doing these things with them without me doing them. And that was a tremendous learning on these standard business things that would happen at a certain scale. But even more importantly, you know how they say, like, it's almost impossible to do something you've never seen someone else do, or you don't know anyone who's done it, you know?
Yeah.
You look around, you're like, oh, look at the Eiffel Tower. You're like, no, people just built that. Like, real people, humans just built that. It's not like the engineers built that. I was around these businesses like, oh my God, this guy just built this business and he sold it for X. And I know him and he's just a regular dude. Like, if he can do it, you know? And by the way, this is what he learned, and here's the mistakes, and here's what to look out for. So that became like another psychological leap, which is like, no, this thing, like, I can do this because these guys are doing this. And I know them, and we're having a beer right now. Like, I can do it, right? That was very important because many businesses, especially ones not coming out of entrepreneurial legacy or something like this, or experience, or HBS or whatever, is like, you get stuck, you know, because it's a self-limiting thought around like what it is, or you don't surround yourself with the people who've done it differently. And you're like, many businesses in our industry, in many industries, you know, get to whatever, 10 employees, 20 employees, 50 employees. And they're like, it's a lifestyle business. Nothing wrong with that. It's actually a choice I think all entrepreneurs have to make. Red pill, blue pill. Nothing wrong with the lifestyle business. But I was like, no way, this thing is too big. Like, so we have to grow. We have to serve as many customers as possible. The work we're doing is too important, right? So how do you do that? That was a big leap for me.
And that's great.
What made me think? YPO is Young Presidents Organization. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, just make sure for any of our listeners. Great. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that the story you just said made me think of Olympic races, the running the mile, because as soon as somebody breaks one barrier, everybody's like, it's possible. And next thing you know, the next race, 10 people do it. You're like, well, you couldn't do it last year. How is it possible this year?
4-minute mile, 3-minute mile, Everest. It took like, you know, hundreds of years for the first person. And the next year, like 10 people did it.
Yeah. The psychological barrier, it's something I've always been so fascinated by. And both Michael and I are, you know, avid readers of just the leadership and and just success book, because it's kind of by default showing us that it's possible, and you just have to, you know, put your own effort to it.
Totally.
What came after, Tony? After kind of Microsoft was, you know, sold. Now it's Google Cloud. What came after? How did you go about scaling of leaders within SADA? Because that itself is not an easy thing to do.
No, like it's very difficult early days self-funded to find talent, because often you cannot afford the talent you need. And it took me a long time to recognize that, you know, when all you can afford is like $40,000 for a job, but this job is really an $80,000 job. Yeah, talent is really freaking hard to find. So what do you do? What did we do? We had to hire kids, basically, and hope they have the right acumen and whatever, and work ethic to become the best in the world at this thing in 3 to 5 years, right? You hope. And we had we did a lot of that in the 2000s, early 2010s, because it's all we could afford. And a lot of it actually worked well. So if you have time, because of the window of opportunity or business cycle, if you have time, grooming young talent is like unbelievable if you find the right people. So we got super lucky. I hired extended family. I hired anybody who we could, basically, right? Some of them literally became the best in the world at what they did. And also made a lot of money, which is great for everybody. But as soon as here's the thing that we did. As soon as we could afford it, and we had some good guidance, we went and hired the absolute best talent money could buy. period. And it's insane. Like you have to, if you're really trying to scale something and grow something big and you're not building a lifestyle business, you have to be willing to pay people more money than you'll make that year. You have to be willing to share in equity and upside of whatever the outcome may be. And that's very difficult for a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, mom and pop, immigrant type, like no experience type of people like ourselves to, and this is something we would not fight, but debate with my parents sometimes because they're like, you're paying that guy how much or that girl how much? I'm like,
yeah,
I know. Yeah. They're like, you're paying them more than you'll make. That's insane. Isn't the point of business to like make money for yourself? I'm like, yeah, but this is the long game, right? So we got so fortunate that people, again, believed in our vision, my leadership, the story, saw the opportunity. They knew that they were going to be given this opportunity that's rare and agency over their fate and their job and their role in a way that a big company can provide. We had to hire them from big companies, essentially. But the right people from the big companies, because if you just hire like a corporate type from a big company, it just never works. We've tried that too. Many people from some big companies like, oh, you work there, come work here. It's like they're gonna suck, they're gonna fail. It's not even their fault. Like you just picked wrong. But if you find the right people, my leadership team over time became just an exceptional team. And you just kind of think about what you have to do going from 1 person to 5 person. We're not crawling around under desks, but what do you have to do when 2019 you just sold the Microsoft business? You have 140 people, and then you have to grow because the market depends it up to like 850. How does your job have to change as a CEO? And it changes exponentially, and you have to have an exceptional team of leaders in key roles. That's like the dream team, so you could keep doing what you're doing, and especially then. Like you have no idea how to create audited financials or how to do, whatever, 606 accounting. You don't know what a 409 valuation is. You don't know how to set up a refined operational backend that can, like you have to hire exceptional people. You're not the best technologist. You probably haven't been for many years. You have to hire the best CTO on the planet. That's what we did. And we were very generous. And I think that generosity for the right people works. And if you try to do it by being penny pinching and not sharing, you're going to probably fail or be very stressed out and miserable.
And one question I'd have there too around what you mentioned about hiring individuals and those executives is the disconnect that you generally see is that hiring somebody that comes out of corporate America, an executive who's not able to put on the more, I don't want to call it startup hat, but the business that's, you have to wear more hats sometimes in these smaller companies. Like what would you describe as that key difference between those who were and weren't successful, since I'm highly summarizing it there?
No, I think they have to be scrappy. They have to be entrepreneurial, even in their own corporate roles. They have to have some history of that. They've been building internally. Maybe they have small business experience. You just have to move much faster in a non-corporate environment, and you have to be more flexible, and you have to be okay with partial information, and you have to trust your gut sometimes, and you have to
faster decisions,
take risks sometimes. If you've been trained by corporate America that the fundamental purpose, it's almost like being a politician, the purpose is to get reelected, right? If the fundamental purpose is to not get fired, and look good, then you're probably very good at managing up, but you probably suck at execution and managing down. And that does not work, or parallel, right? And that just doesn't work in a small environment. CYA has to go out the door. We're all taking risks together. We got to move fast. You got to be accessible. You have to be good with people, hire well, good with each other. You're not competing with everyone for the next job. It's just not that environment. So you have to have that, those things kind of, hopefully not programmed badly by corporate America for too long. Then, you can be successful at the smaller place.
And be okay without an assistant to do your things for you.
Yeah. I mean, assistants were, We eventually had assistance, but I certainly did, given how much I was traveling. But yeah, it's like you have to book my own flight. What?
Yeah.
How do I do that?
Yeah. I love, I mean, how you broke that out. I coach people on the career side of it. And I think you said a couple of things there that people don't like to have to admit about corporate America. But the thing that you mentioned, you know, you are basically constantly, you know, like call it presidential or anybody else. It's sometimes hard to do what you want because you're too busy dancing for that next career move versus necessarily trying to think about, if this were mine, what would I want to do, or how do I operate this in that more scrappy manner. And the idea here about, you know, what you mentioned too about, yeah, it's a matter of how do you look at, how do you get reelected by your constituents, you know, for lack of a better way to put it. Yeah. But sad but true. And then I admit, and this is something as I left corporate America, I talked about, I'm like, okay, I finally have shaken off all of my programming, even though I like to think I found a way to live in that sort of hybrid world where I could be a little bit of both of what you're describing.
Look, let me just say that just from some experience of serving customers like Disney and just knowledge of Netflix. I mean, you both come from two places that could execute like all hell and had amazing, just amazing innovation and amazing execution and admirable processes. Netflix also renowningly paid people exceptionally well, right? Yeah. For all the reasons I described. So yeah. I think that's probably two places where you have the least bad programming that you could in corporate America.
Yeah. Well, that's good. We'll say that. I could say, because, you know, each of those, having seen it, it's like definitely Netflix, especially as Netflix has been able to be in startup mode. I'll say when I left there, they finally hit this phase where it's like, okay, we can't do it the way that we were doing it before, you know, but whereas, you know, what we talk about sometimes with Disney is within a large company like that, you actually have subcultures in some way. Like, you know, and even Netflix ultimately had two cultures, the studio and the technology arm, however you want to say that way. But it is so fascinating to see. I definitely think it's a very real thing and something that people have to realize. And it's one of the big downsides of, you know, deciding to work for somebody else. Not saying that, you know, again, for some people it's that right approach and fit, but you are constantly going to be cheerleading, you know, for lack of a better way to put it. And maybe there's a better way I should say it. You're just politicking a lot more. And I'm sure though, you being in your own business you ran, would you still say there was a level of politicking that you had to do around customers and things like that? Or did you feel free of it?
Anytime I sensed politics, it would drive me insane. I would work very hard to shut it down immediately. I would call people's bullshit, but a lot of it is just leading by example, man. Like I was, for some reason, when I did my like weekly meeting of the new hires or whatever, people at some point, so it started happening the last 3 years, people would be like, I've never met the CEO of any company I've ever worked before. I'm like, that's fucking weird to me, dude. Like, that's weird. Or they would text and I would respond, or they would chat and I would respond. And, and you know, Elon Musk wrote like a memo years ago where he was like, anybody can talk to anybody else about anything at any time. If anybody tries to stop direct communication, you're fired. Like, that's me. Like, yes, you have to have some command and control. You have to have some people will come to me and I actually send them. I'll be like, look, this is the way to do it. You go to this, let me know how it goes. Right. I wouldn't be like the captain save everybody all the time, but refusing to hear, like, I've worked with other big companies, right? And man, these subcultures were like, if I even answer the phone, it makes me culpable and or responsible to actually do something. So I'm not going to reply. I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, this is real. Like, this is a real thing that corporate, you know, people think about. So, you have to have the counter of that if you're trying to do anything transformational, I think, and you're small.
No, I, what you just said there too, you know, the difference for me, even what I saw between these two cultures of Disney and Netflix, even though, again, ultimately, I still think both were great companies to work for. But with Disney, there was definitely that thing of, it's like, oh, you know, hey, that person, Art and I wanted, you know, to have certain mentors at one point. They're like, oh no, you don't talk to that person as a mentor, you know, like, just let them do their thing. We'll place you with somebody. It's like, are you kidding me? I want to be able to do that myself. Netflix, when I joined them, within a couple of weeks, I was having dinner at Reed, CEO's house, because he would, whenever there were any new executives hired him, he wanted to have that. And like, literally that created that culture.
That's what I would do.
Yeah. It's amazing. And
Yeah.
in doing so, you create this thing too, where at that point I'm like, dude, whatever you need, I'm here for you. I got you. Like, cause I loved that sense of not only belonging, but that sense of literally you believed it when somebody said, talk to me. Cause I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people think that's lip service at companies. They're like, oh yeah, we have this culture. There's
No,
that. They're
look,
like,
it's not just a nice thing to do. Reed is not nice. He's efficient. Okay. Just like
right.
when I was thinking about like communication, I was like, I never wanted to hear an excuse. I couldn't do something because I didn't get the help I needed, or something got lost in translation, or I couldn't communicate, or we couldn't respond fast enough. Now, these are like rational decisions that you have to make about execution and quality and the truth. Like you have to be very into the truth. We would always be like, what's actually happening? I don't want to hear somebody's, interpretation or, in big companies, it's like, there's like this incident report or whatever, or post mortem. And then somebody sees and they're like, oh no, we can't say that. Then it goes to the next one. Oh no, we're going to, and by the time the CEO or whoever gets it, doesn't remotely resemble any information that could help them prevent that from happening again. Right. So it's like, so you have to kind of think about that. I think, and I hope that, if I ever did anything ever again, and let's say it was much bigger than SADA, I'd still be able to influence that kind of culture. Of course, it depends on people being grown-ups and ability to set boundaries in all directions. But it's much better than I think a lot of companies ultimately fail because they lull themselves to sleep in a bunch of fantasy that doesn't resemble anything about what customers want or who the good leaders are or any of that. So that's just bad news all around in my mind.
Tony, how much of SADA's culture was intentional and how much of it was organic?
I think there was an element and continued to be, I think, even post-acquisition. I give my mom kind of a lot of credit for this. Like she's always like the heart of SADA. So SADA always had a heart. And I think we tried over the last 10 years, especially, to kind of remove any of the preconceived hokey notions about family business, but kept all the good stuff about family business, right? Long-term thinking, we care about one another, we respect one another. If you're on this team, you are like family, although people kind of these days kind of almost reject that notion, like don't call companies families, you don't fire family. Fine. But we didn't really subscribe to that. We're like, we got you. Whatever's happening in your life, we got you. You need help, we got you. Like family. I think that was just part of the family origin of the business and will continue to be a family business for a long time. I think some of the things were definitely influenced by, long-term thinking, Forever Game, Simon Sinek, and other kind of thought leaders on that, or other great leaders that I would see. But to me, a lot of these things that would guide my own behavior were just sort of like rational to me. They were not about being nice or winning an award for Mr. Congeniality or the most accessible CEO award or whatever. It was like, no, this is the best and optimal strategy, right? This is the best execution. Politics are bad. Putting yourself too far from customers is bad. Too far from, this sort of like trust but verify construct that's, I think my dad likes to reference this because it's like a Soviet era Reagan thing or something. Trust but verify. I agree with that. Yeah, trust but verify. Like actually get down there and like look at the quality of the work once in a while, because it's not even accusatory of someone's, malintent. It's just like, no, people could like not know that something could be done better. So you should look at it once in a while and guide them so that it's better. Like, how do we make it better? And how do we not repeat mistakes? It's a very basic intent with this culture that we try to create.
Sounds so simple, but I see so many companies overcomplicate this. To a point that there's so many layers and bureaucracy that you can never actually pierce through it to get to like the result that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's kind of fast forward to last couple of years. obviously there was a lot of passion and just heart put into building and scaling SADA. What led to saying, I think it's time to walk away?
So there was not a thought about walking away until very recently. Like when I decided, I just did it. It was like a very short window, but we did realize about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, that we looked at the ecosystem, we looked at the competitive set, we looked at our customer base, we looked at the cloud ecosystem in general, and we saw a couple of things. One is our customers were getting very, very big. So our customers were big. It meant that they were all also being served by every global systems integrator in the world, who they've always bought from. And even though in most cases, especially a couple of years back, I think they all kind of still suck, but they suck at Google. Some of them are getting better at Google, for example, but they would pick the global systems integrator to do a project that they're not qualified to do over us because they had incumbency, they had a relationship, they had contracts, they had 5,000 people sitting in an account. Like, yeah, I'm going to probably buy from Accenture. I have this $20 million contract. You know, SADA sounds like they know it better, but you know what? Like, it'll take me a year to get them in the vendor system. So we saw that kind of stuff. Like, shit, it's really like we're going up market, and this is top 500 customers in the world are the bread and butter of every major U.S. and non-U.S. based global systems integrator. The other thing we saw is in our, again, competitive set, there was a lot of M&A in themselves. There was people raising capital, there's companies merging, they were scaling, they were developing offshore capabilities very quickly. So we're like, shoot, like self-funded, it's very hard to do this. We did make one self-funded small acquisition, which ended up being fantastic. That's how our offshore capabilities in India scaled very quickly. And I love this team and love the people. We could do that off balance sheet because it was like 30 people, but we're like, so we're going to need to get serious about our capital structure. So we looked at all options around private equity. We looked at all options around minority, majority. Like, how are we going to do this, right? Because we knew we had to scale. We could not go head to head as a self-funded business with our competitors who were merging with each other, and our massive competitors, which a couple of years ago just were not at the table at all because they didn't take the Google business seriously. It wasn't big enough. And by the way, those big companies weren't really doing big Google stuff. And if they did, the size were not, they couldn't even hold a certificate up to say that we could do it, right? Which is still years away from actually being able to do it, but they weren't even there yet. So we had this opportunity for many years to be picked based on merit. And we're losing now sometimes where merit is not a factor at all. It's about how long does it take to get SADA in the vendor system? I have this other massive contract, internal political pressure, internal fiefdoms of, I like Wipro and I like Deloitte's. I'm just going to use Deloitte's. I don't want to, whatever. The inside. Yeah. So we're like, this is no longer a meritocracy. We can win in a meritocracy. It's no longer a meritocracy. We have to do something. So, but going through that process over the last 2-3 years in a very dynamic market, macro and otherwise, it just ended up that a strategic acquirer, and it was the best choice. And it was the best choice because private equity, ultimately, the ones that are investing in this space are generally not growth investors. They're generally value investors. They're looking for distressed assets they could underpay for and put a bunch of them together and, sell them for more one day. Take a lot of redundancy out. Like, they're value investors. Software PE, they're growth investors. There was a moment where software PEs were interested in our space, but then when the big sort of interest rate, inflation, the sort of debt markets froze up, they all backed out, which is disappointing because we're actually had a great conversation with a couple of them. Like, oh my God, a software investor is going to invest in us because we have software-like attributes and they like our business. And that was kind of devastating to have that false start. So then the value guys were left and they were just all terrible. didn't really understand what we wanted to do. Not terrible. They were all great people, but like we're not a distressed asset. So then it's like, okay, who are the strategics going to be? And again, because of our business model, Google only, we sell the technology and we service it. The profile of buyer, I mean, there's very few SIs who needed to be in the Google business, wanted to buy the Google business, could afford and wanted to buy the biggest Google partner in the world, and were both services and a selling company, like a resale capable company. Very few, but Insight was exactly in this position. They were like number one or number two at Microsoft. They had a very small AWS practice. They needed to get into Google because their customers were asking for it. They know how to sell cloud software, and they have a great, services investment going, and culturally also a great, wonderful company who I've known from our Microsoft years. Of course, everybody in our industry knew who Insight was. So that's how that deal went down. And my dad had always said we should look at strategics, and I was like, I think we just should raise money, Dad, and do what all these other guys were doing. But I almost didn't realize a lot of those deals were much smaller. These are small checks. These are founders who were 80 who wanted to leave. And, there's all this stuff happening in our Google ecosystem. That was different than our story. And also the market timing didn't help with the optionality around private equity. So that's where we ended up.
When the deal was kind of final and you saw the number of zeros, how did that make you feel?
I think it was like I didn't really know how to interpret that much money. Like, who knows, right? But look, I'm competitive. I knew it was sort of the biggest deal in the space. I knew that it was, I think, Insight's first or second largest acquisition. And to be honest, I felt a great degree of responsibility and accountability to deliver that value. And of course, very happy for my parents that they've achieved what they've always said would require for them to stop working. I don't know why. But I was like, maybe finally they can slow down. They're like approaching, they'll be 70 in first quarter of next year, both of them. So I was excited. I was very happy for my executive team and for, many, many other people at SADA who were about to make a lot of money, life-changing, amounts. I think that there was one case, people coming in and my CEO was telling them, and people had like forgotten they've been here so long, like people crying. There was like a guy who, made $60,000 a year and was about to get like a $500,000 check or something like that. Like crazy stuff was happening.
Amazing.
Really rewarding things. But look, I think we were successful financially before this. I think obviously this is slightly different stratosphere, or maybe significantly different stratosphere. And I just, and my parents are really good about this. They're so exceptionally down to earth. And so based on fundamentals like family, truth, love, humility, that everyone is probably, more concerned about like, how do I not fuck up my kids now than what car I can buy? Because I could have bought the car before, like it's irrelevant, right? So I think it's more that how can we give back? How do you do it responsibly? How do you do multi-generational planning? How do you do philanthropy well? How do you manage your friendships? How do you manage your kids making fun of for their house being so big? Like stupid shit happens, right? And I'm more concerned about that than counting the money. But of course, I do recognize the rarity of what has happened. Almost nobody grows an organic business without outside capital and sells, for this amount. Certainly nobody's done it in our space. And what a crazy story of this immigrant family who came here in 1987 with no experience in entrepreneurship to have done this. And really how lucky we are and how blessed I am that I get to spend now so much time with my kids before my oldest one leaves in 4.5 years. And my next one leaves in 6.5 years. of course, I have this little rugrat that I'll be, with forever. But how do I be the best husband that I can be, the best dad that I can be, the best son that I could be, the best friend that I could be, and how do you not mess it up, for your friends and for your family?
Which is a great place to be, considering oftentimes when people start their life and they try to picture that dream that they want, but then they get so caught up in trying to achieve that they don't actually get the chance to live in it. So that's great that you're in that place. And I'm curious, because you said before about, knowing kind of to skate where the puck is going. Whereas right now you may not, have particular things that you're targeting back in, the world of business, per se. I am curious for our listeners, or let's just face it, secretly, Artin and I know, what are your, what would you recommend? What do you think is that thing? Like if you were at a point earlier in you're starting off in your career, is there a couple of areas that you would look at right now that you're like, I would probably really invest, more of my time, resources into this?
I like the S&P 500.
Okay. Yeah.
That seems to be a safe bet.
Yeah.
No, honestly, Michael, I don't spend much time thinking about it right now. And I don't know. The best advice I got was from a relatively new friend that I made in the last couple of years, who also had an exit. He said, Tony, you've been running and doing one thing and thinking about one thing and doing one thing only for 24 years. It's all you've been thinking about, dreaming about, reading about, talking about. It's very important that you do nothing for 18 months. You say no to everything. Don't invest, don't join a board, don't extend your, don't do anything, don't start anything. And 18 months to me sounds like a great minimum.
Yeah.
And I hope in that time to just chill and enjoy my kids and family. Like I love my current schedule. And then I think what's likely to happen at some point in the future, some light bulb will go off. No idea when, no idea how. When I'm not looking, I'm not thinking about it. And maybe one day, and maybe, by the way, maybe never. A lot of people get in trouble trying to replicate what they did. There'll never be another SADA, probably for me, but it'll be something I'm so passionate about that I can't stop thinking about it. And I can't stop noodling on it and building spreadsheets about it and building, researching it. And then I'll know, I was like, okay, this is the next thing I want to do. Right now I got no plans and no ideas. And I know that sounds maybe disappointing and boring, but I think that's it's just what it is. I'm not trying to not do anything. I have no preconceived notion about what my life would look like. I'm just like, what I'm feeling right now is no motivation to do anything other than spend time with my kids and get engaged in my kids' schools and that kind of stuff.
You've earned that. I think that's fair. Though you did say something I'm going to extract from there that I think is super valuable for people to consider. And that's when you mentioned that your friend is giving you that advice to take that time because you've been so immersed, dedicated to this area and this space for such a long time. I really do think that that's part of that key there, is that you immersed yourself in something so much from the time that you were under desk to the time that you continued to evolve that to what it was by staying really focused in this field, looking for solutions. Because I think sometimes people could suffer from shiny object syndrome because everybody is looking for that next get rich, whatever it is. Okay, I'm going to pursue this right now.
I say this all the time.
Yeah.
I say this all the time.
That sounds like that, such the critical piece for people to consider, because if you focus on anything and becoming the best at that thing, then you're going to be able to offer theoretically the best product solutions, as you look to that. And that's ultimately what helps people. I think it's those who keep looking at the new thing or what that is. And right now, don't get me wrong, AI, there's a lot of potential for AI, but I think those who are going to be successful aren't those who are just chasing AI. It's those who are chasing a specific market in the business and just looking at how they leverage AI to be the best in that area.
Yeah, AI is interesting because it's not like cloud 2005 or 6. Everyone knows that AI is going to be transformational. There's already trillions of dollars going into it. And it happened in like 6 months, right?
Ridiculous.
There's not this window of where, there's a supply-demand disparity of either investment or whatever. Like And of course, it's super exciting. But if you ask me like, what's the best way to make money in AI, I'd be like, I don't know, buy Nvidia stock. Like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I guess like that seems pretty safe, but there's not. So we benefited from this just early exposure to something that nobody else understood for many, many, many years. People understood Gen AI and LLMs instantly because this company called OpenAI launched a thing called ChatGPT.
Right.
There was no ChatGPT moment for cloud in 2005, 6, 7.
There's a
right?
slow but surely, yeah.
And that's what it takes to outperform the market. There has to be a disparity in supply, or to have hyper growth. Like you have to have a disparity of supply and demand. You have to have something that not everybody sees or gets. And I think that's difficult to find. And somebody was saying, or I said it a long time ago, like people also, I think, suffer from trying to chase, like they think they can just do it again and again and again. Like we're not Steve Jobs, dude. We're not Elon Musk. Like even Oprah can make, I think, their own network, lost billions of dollars. Like Oprah, you did your talk show, you crushed it. You can't just like, I'm going to make a network and that's going to be immediately successful, right? Like we have to, anybody that's done anything big and refuses to admit that luck had a lot to do with it is full of shit. Okay. So, not that the other things are not a necessary component to it, but they're necessary, but they're insufficient. You also have to have the luck, timing, good fortune, maybe once, maybe multiple times on this journey, like I think we had. And I don't know what the next thing might be, but I love and I'm so grateful to have the optionality and the time to think about it and to for maybe something to come into my head later. But right now it's really just about how do I not screw up the kids?
Yep. That's a great focus.
Yeah. So, I mean, Tony, as you're saying it, and we agree that, the future is hard to predict. But in your own words, you're kind of in the retirement right now. With, what I would call some FU money probably. And retire before 50. Mm-hmm. If somebody's looking, let's say they're 25 and they want to retire before 50 with their own definition of FU money, what 3 pieces of advice would you have for this 25-year-old?
Find something that you can't stop thinking about that also happens to have the potential of tremendous demand, and focus only on that thing for an exceptionally long period of time. That's it. Like you said, Michael, it's not like, I think it's, NFTs or crypto is a thing, and AI is a thing. I'm going to be an influencer, and Mr. Beast can do it, like stuff like that. Like it's people don't see 99.99% of the failures, in those things. So just find SADA did not feel like work for a very long time. I think probably till the end. I just freaking loved it, man. I loved every minute of cloud and Google and Microsoft and customers, the stories the customers would tell because of the impact on our lives of our employees, man. I just loved every moment of all I could think about. So I wish that on anybody on whatever journey they're on, to just love the work. Of course, be frustrated. Of course, get your ass kicked sometimes. Of course, win some awards sometimes. But the point is, like, just love the freaking work. You got to love the work. I think it's hard. I couldn't imagine not loving it and having to do what we did.
Do you have any big regrets by chance? I mean, it sounds like you've achieved the things you have. You're in a really great place right now. Do you look back at any particular thing and say, well, I do wish I would have done this differently?
Not really. It's hard to do that.
That might be your answer.
It's hard. I mean, of course, there's products that didn't work, services that didn't work. There was bad hires. There was It's like it's like no. I think I think everything happened when it was supposed to happen, and even people that were the wrong hires taught us something, and
I love it. I thought that
What
might be
was-
your answer just
was
based
what it
on this
was, yeah.
conversation and what you've achieved,
Yeah.
because that's an incredible
Yeah.
place to be. So.
Now, Tony, this has been such a fascinating and enjoyable conversation. As you have more free time now, if listeners want to find you because they have a question for you, where can they find you?
It's gonna be hard to find me, man. I'm barely on LinkedIn anymore. I barely looked at LinkedIn. I love this platform. Is my outlet for everything, and I'm barely on that. But I guess they can email me at tony@safoian.com, and I may or may not respond. But
that's a great way to look at it, especially the quality of the pitch. No, I'm just kidding. Are you getting people who pitch you on stuff now?
One of the best presents I got was from a customer CEO, a material security CEO. He sent me like a bottle of something and a hat, and the hat said, "Don't email me."
That's great.
That's amazing.
Great. That's great. Well, Tony, thanks so much for your time. We'll let you go back to your retirement.
Appreciate you both, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll definitely be in touch. And if anybody watching or listening, if you got more things that you want to ask us, just drop them in the comments and we'll try to get back to you. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks
Don't
for
mess up
having me.
those kids,
Appreciate
Tony.
it.
Don't mess up those
Don't
kids.
mess them up.
Don't mess them up.